In the aftermath of World War II, the world stood at a precipice. The devastation left by the war reshaped nations, economies, and alliances. The year was 1945. Europe lay in ruins. The death toll reached tens of millions. But from the ashes of conflict emerged a hopeful vision: the United Nations. Leaders convened in San Francisco, intent on crafting an organization that would prevent future wars. It was a revolutionary idea: global cooperation aimed at preserving peace. At its core, the UN was founded on principles of impartiality and fairness. The purpose: to foster dialogue and collaboration among nations. With nations divided into spheres of influence, the stakes were monumental. The UN had to navigate the complexities of post-war geopolitics. The stakes were high, and everyone had a stake in seeing that peace was maintained. But what would this monumental institution look like? And where would it be based? Location became a hotly contested issue, a chessboard for world powers to maneuver. Amid rising tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, the question echoed through diplomatic halls: who would control the heart of global governance? The early goals of the UN clearly stated the intention of establishing a neutral ground, a place free of the nationalistic agendas that had fueled the devastating global conflict. Yet, human greed and political maneuvering lurked just below the surface. The vision was to create a unified space where all voices could contribute to the dialogue, yet nations jostled for position, seeking advantage over their rivals. The United States offered New York City, a bustling metropolis, a symbol of democracy and freedom. It was enticing, but rooted in the desire to legitimize American power on a global stage. Conversely, many nations, particularly those in Europe, wanted the UN in a place that symbolized reconciliation and neutrality. Geneva stood out, a city rich in history of diplomacy and home to numerous international organizations. Would this choice underscore America's dominance or lend credence to a more balanced global governance? As negotiations dragged on, the Cold War loomed ominously. The division hardened between the capitalist West and the communist East. Each side looked at the potential site of the United Nations through their own ideological lenses. The Soviet Union saw in any UN headquarters, especially located in the US, a direct threat. American leaders anticipated a platform from which to challenge Soviet influence. The stakes grew as they laid their claims on various cities. While discussions teetered on the brink of collapse, both sides faced a stark reality. The UN was not merely a location, but a battleground for ideological dominance. The question now was not just where to plant the UN's roots, but what those roots would grow into. The potential site became a microcosm of larger global tensions, affecting alliances far beyond New York and Geneva. Would this new global body become a beacon for peace or a stage for escalating conflict? As the diplomatic wrangling continued, whispers of tension grew louder. Who would ultimately claim victory in this war of wills? Would the UN flourish or become another casualty in the Cold War landscape? And more critically, what unforeseen consequences would arise from the final decision on where the United Nations would call home? The battle for the United Nations headquarters was a high-stakes contest, drawing cities from all corners of the globe into a fierce competition. Emerging from the ashes of World War II, nations looked to make a statement, a beacon of peace. London, with its historical significance, San Francisco, where the UN was birthed, and Geneva, the traditional home for international diplomacy, each put forth its case. Who would secure this monumental site? However, behind the scenes, a different game was unfolding. The United States, eager to showcase its power and ideals, rallied influential support for New York City. President Franklin D. Roosevelt believed that placing the UN headquarters in the US would symbolize freedom and democracy in direct opposition to the tyranny represented by the Axis powers. His vision started gaining traction, but he faced fierce opposition from European nations that favored Geneva's long-standing neutrality and reputation for diplomacy. New York's case was bolstered by a mix of political maneuvering and well-timed lobbying. Prominent politicians and business leaders championed the city's cause. The push became a reflection of Cold War dynamics. The US wanted to project its influence while the Soviets and their allies were keen to challenge it. City planners and diplomats mapped out potential sites, but the final decision hinged on more than just geography. It involved financial clout and connections. It was here that the Rockefellers stepped in. Nelson Rockefeller, a key figure, envisioned the UN headquarters as a centerpiece for his city's cultural and political life. The Rockefeller family made a transformative move, promising a significant donation to secure the land for the proposed site. Their generosity spoke volumes. It wasn't mere philanthropy. It was an investment in New York's role on the world stage. They acquired land in Manhattan specifically for this purpose, further cementing the city's claim. The bidding war intensified. Both proponents and detractors could smell the victory or defeat in the air. The atmosphere was charged, almost electric. Who would emerge triumphant? With the backing of influential businessmen and the American government's pressure, New York City gradually shifted from a mere contender to the frontrunner. Debate raged in the halls of power. Would this decision alienate other nations? Would it further polarize the East and West in an already divided world? Yet, as the votes were cast, clarity emerged. In late 1946, New York City was chosen. The decision sent waves throughout the international community. Was this really a victory for peace, or just another display of American dominance? The choice was fraught with implications. Could the UN truly remain neutral? Did locating its headquarters in the US compromise its mission? As the world held its breath, construction began. The vision of a United Nations embodied in a single place was materializing, but a storm brewed beneath the surface. With New York City now secured as the headquarters, the stage was set for the United Nations to take on its role. But the tensions were mounting. What challenges awaited the UN in this new home, especially as Cold War hostilities heated up? Would the ideals of cooperation and peace hold firm, or would they be tested in ways no one could foresee? As the United Nations took root in New York City, the world watched closely. Geopolitical tensions simmered just beneath the surface. How would a headquarters in the heart of American territory impact international diplomacy? This was no trivial concern. The lingering shadow of the Cold War loomed large. In the General Assembly, delegates from countries worldwide debated heatedly. Many feared that placing the UN in New York would inadvertently tilt the balance of power. The Soviet Union and its allies voiced premature apprehension. Could the US influence UN decisions unduly? At every session, their representatives raised concerns, arguing that every vote of support for the US could lead to diminished trust. Countries like Egypt and India joined the chorus, wary of American dominance in international affairs. Throughout 1947 and into the following years, the political maneuvering intensified. Argentina, under its newly established regime, openly criticized the choice of New York. They feared the purported American ideals of freedom and democracy could become a smokescreen for U.S. hegemony in global governance. Debates raged on the floor. The Assembly echoed with questions. Would decisions made in Manhattan truly represent the voices of the world, or merely echo the priorities of the U.S.? During this tumultuous period, lines were drawn. Western nations generally backed New York, viewing it as a symbol of unity. Meanwhile, Eastern Bloc countries worked tirelessly behind the scenes, urging a more neutral location to ensure balance. Geneva's candidacy resurfaced, thrust into discussions by Soviet delegates. Tensions flared during discussions about the UN's ability to remain impartial. The notion of a neutral headquarters took hold in some circles, but the power dynamics at play weren't easy to navigate. One particularly contentious moment arose in early 1948. A proposal floated. The UN's authority would require a rotating presidency among member nations to counterbalance American influence. The suggestion ignited fierce debate. Nations like France cautiously weighed in, recalling the Treaty of Versailles delegation to Paris and the unintended consequences that followed. Was this proposal a viable solution or simply a patch on a growing rift? Then came a bombshell. A leaked memo suggested that the United States was secretly negotiating military alliances intended to position itself advantageously in any future UN deliberations. This revelation sent shockwaves through an already tense assembly. What would this mean for the integrity of an organization built on international cooperation? Each member nation grappled with this revelation in real time, shielding their thoughts behind carefully chosen words. Weeks later, a significant vote approached. The assembly was to decide on the UN's internal structure, likely shaping the organization's long-term power dynamics. Opposing factions began to coalesce, rallying their supporters for a monumental showdown. Would a coalition form to push for diplomatic reforms, or would the US maintain its influential grasp? This wasn't just a decision on internal governance, it represented a defining moment for the fledgling organization. As the countdown to the vote ticked down, the assembly hall buzzed with tension. Allies and foes alike prepared to draw battle lines, their ambitions laid bare. Within that charged atmosphere, a singular question loomed large. Would New York serve as a beacon of hope or become a battleground for the competing interests of a polarized world? Keep watching as political maneuvering reaches a fever pitch and alliances shift in unexpected ways. The fate of the United Nations, and perhaps the whole world, hangs in the balance. The decision to place the United Nations in New York City marked a pivotal moment in global diplomacy. The decision did not just build a headquarters, it built a stage for international dialogue that shaped the post-war world. New York became a melting pot, a bustling hub where nations convened to hash out their differences. Diplomats from every corner of the globe navigated the city's streets, forging tentative alliances and hashing out critical negotiations. Yet, this choice was not without its consequences. The perceived dominance of the United States over the UN created ripples in international relations. For many countries, especially in the Eastern Bloc, the symbolism of New York was as striking as the skyscrapers that loomed overhead. It suggested a weighting of influence that made them uneasy. Could they trust an organization headquartered in a city synonymous with American power? The fear wasn't just of bias, it was an existential worry about the sovereignty of their nations and a replay of imperial narratives long buried. As the UN settled into its role, the implications grew clearer. With the US firmly steering the ship, member states grappled with how to position themselves in this new world order. Some nations allied closer to the Soviet Union, seeking to counterbalance what they perceived as an overwhelming American hegemony. They sought to create voting blocs in the General Assembly, emphasizing cooperation among less powerful nations. But the stronghold of New York fostered a peculiar phenomenon. It elevated American diplomacy to new heights. The very essence of conducting international relations shifted. The US became not only a participant, but a powerhouse, leveraging its economic might and cultural influence. For some nations, the allure of doing business with America overshadowed traditional alliances. The initiatives presented from this New World capital sometimes felt more like a unilateral agenda than a collaborative effort. The fear of a return to isolationism or the collapse of fragile alliances drove many countries to continuously engage with the UN, even as the Cold War tensions boiled over. Crisis after crisis punctuated the years. When the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted in 1962, the world turned to the UN, seeking a platform to cool tensions. The United Nations, despite the setting sun of its impartiality, remained crucial. It stood as a testament to international commitments, symbolizing hope amid chaos. Yet, as discussions about the UN's favoring of certain nations took root, questions about its effectiveness lingered. The very foundation built on compromise and collective progress, whispering in the shadows, echoed doubts about the greed and motivations of those in power. Was the UN merely a facade for American dominance, or could it truly be a force for global good? The choices made in those early years laid the groundwork for future interactions on the world stage. The struggles of establishing fair representation have endured, influencing debates around the UN's reforms even today. As national interests often clashed with the need for cooperation, lessons of political maneuvering emerged starkly, revealing a paradox. The quest for peace often spirals into power plays driven by greed. As the lessons of the past are reevaluated, one question looms large. Could the location of the United Nations have been a decisive factor in influencing the course of history? Or could a different choice have shifted the balance of global power entirely? The ramifications of that monumental decision remain to be explored.